மதியம் சடைமேற் மேற்கொண்டார். குடமுழ நந்தீசனை வாசகனாக் கொண்டார். சிராமலை தம் சேவிடமாத் திருந்தக் கொண்டார். தென்றல் தேரோனை பொன்றக் கொண்டார். பராபரம் என்பது தமது பேரா கொண்டார். பருப்பதம் கைக்கொண்டார். பயங்கள் பண்ணி இராவணன் என்றவனை பேரியம்பக் கொண்டார். இடர் உரு நோய் தீர்த்தென்னை ஆட்கொண்டாரே. In this, upper praises Lord Shiva in various different ways for various different leelas or happenings that had happened in the world. First, he says, Kura Malarodu Ara Madiyam Sademel Kondar. In his long matted locks, he has Kuramalar, which is a type of flower which is used to worship Lord Shiva. He adorns that in his matted locks. Ara, which is snake. Madiyam, which is a crescent moon. All of them are in Lord Shiva's matted locks. Kudamula Nandisane Vasahana Kondar. Kudamula, as we see, is a particular drum that's played by Lord Nandi. Kudamula Nandisanai Vasahana Kondar. Lord Nandi, who plays Kudamula, came down as Vasahan, in which case it's Mickkavachagar. Siramalai tam Servidama Tirundak Kondar. Siramalai is Tiruchirappalli or Trichy. Servidama Tirundak Kondar. He lives in Tiruchirappalli in the hillock where he has a temple. Tendral Nedun Thoranai Pondrak Kondar. He has the wind, the southern wind, as his chariot. Parabaram என்பது தமது பேரா கொண்டார். Parabaram is the supreme being. He has that as his name. Parupadam kai kondar. He has the Meru mountain as his one of the weapons. பயங்கள் பண்ணி இராவணன் என்றவனை பேரியம்பக் கொண்டார். By creating fear, he also created a monster called Ravanan, who happens to appear in Ramayana as the one who takes away Sita from Lord Rama. He also created that. Idar uru noi தீர்த்தென்னை ஆட்கொண்டாரே. This is a biographical statement by Appar. Appar suffered a very bad ailment when he was not part of the Lord Shiva's devotees. Upon surrendering to Lord Shiva, the pain was completely cured, and Appar became a complete devotee of Lord Shiva and ended up singing his glories across the board. So he talks about that in the last line, Idaruru noi Tirthennai Atkondare. This particular sentence, Kudamula Nandisane Vasahana Kondar, while we interpret it as Nandisan came as Vasahan, there are also other interpretations that are given in the exposition of this particular verse by Appar. However, using that same exact statement, Muruganar creates the emphatic declaration, Kudamula Nandisane Vasahana Yeindadu Kondadu Avuluval. What's interesting is there are many scholarly articles written about Mickkavachagar's lifetime. Some declare that to be 3rd century. Some articles say he was born in 8th or 9th century, and some actually offer his time frame to be either 11th or 12th century. The reasons being, the big exposition written on 63 saints by Sekriyar called PM Puranam did not have Mickkavachagar's name in it. So one theory is that Mickkavachagar could not have been born at the time that the 63 Saints book was written. Equally, there was also other side of the story where Mickkavachagar was so ancient, well before Appar's time, such as 3rd century, that Appar sang his praises not only in this particular verse, but as we might say in subsequent sessions, he has made that reference about Mickkavachagar's life story at least in a couple of different places in his verses. But no other saintly poets at that time, whether it's Samandar or Sundarar, make any references to Mickkavachagar's lifetime. So that is a scholarly debate. In addition, the temple that Manikavachagar built at Tiruparanturai, or Audiyar Kovil as it's known today, has not been sung by Appar Sundara or Samandar during their pilgrimage, where they go and sing at various different places. So that's also both as a evidence on both sides of the story. Irrespective of where or when Manikavachagar was born, it's enough to know that Appar himself acknowledged that Nandisan came as Manikavachagar, which is what this line actually says to us. With that, we will move to lines number 21 to 26 of Ramana Puranam. மூண்ட அழல் போன்று முருகலான் முக்தி நெறிக்கு ஆண்ட கழல் அன்றி அறியா பரவசத்தில் சந்த நடை சான்ற தமிழ்நாடன் வாசிதர தந்த நிதித்திரளின் தன்ம விசேடத்தால் குருமூர்த்தமாக குலவிய தன் கோவில் பரமார்த்தம் என்று அப்பணியில் செலவிடவே. This is, as you can see, is a very dense set of Tamil words woven together to create this wonderful section of the verse. The first two lines declare about the fervent nature of devotees who are on the path of supreme liberation. மூண்ட அழல் போன்று முருகலான் முக்தி நெறிக்கு. Murugudal is maturing or maturing in intensity. Mukti neri, mukti is liberation or freedom from the cycle of birth and death, or permanent abidance in the self. Neri means a path. So Murugalan Mukti Neriki means the intense maturing of journey towards one's liberation. He compares that to Munda Aral Pondru. Pondru means like. It's a metaphor. Munda Aral is a small fire, and how that actually grows in size as it catches on all the neighboring things. So it becomes a big blazing fire at the end of it all. Likewise, what starts as a small desire towards liberation grows in size over a period of time as devotees' mind mature in intensity to reach the feet of Lord. That's the next line. Anda Kajal Andri Arya Paravasatil. Anda Kajal is the ruling anklet of the Lord. So, in other words, Mukti Nerikku Anda Kajal. Lord's feet, which as we discussed in the last few sessions, means the inner awareness that's held in in each person's heart, is the one that directs one towards the permanent liberation or permanent abidance of the self. Having been acquainted to that particular inner awareness and the continuous abidance in that particular inner awareness moves one towards permanent liberation. When one is in such a path, they wouldn't care or they wouldn't know about anything else. That is what is meant by Andri Ariya Paravasatil. They wouldn't know and they couldn't care anything about any other material happenings or material actions. So, like fire, which starts small, that grows in size as it catches on many things, the small desire that starts towards one's permanent liberation, as one continues to abide in the inner awareness, which is also called as Aham Spurana by our Bhagavan, as it grows, as it takes time over a period of time, that maturity leads one to permanent liberation. When one is in such path, everything else becomes irrelevant or not important. That's what the first two lines are meant to be. Moonda Ayal Pondru Murugalan Mukti Nerikku Anda Kajal Andri Ariya Paravasatil. So Kajal is an anklet worn by a victorious soldier in ancient days. So here Anda Kajal is we could actually see that reference in multiple different places in ancient literature, particularly in Mickkavachagar's poems in Tiruvachakam, where it's meant to say that the anklets of the Lord, or Lord Shiva, um, is meant to show his victory over ignorance, meaning the victory of complete awareness and permanent liberation over the repeated ignorance that immerses one individual into the birth and death cycle. As that victory happens, the anklets of such a victorious Lord is praised in a lot of poems. Moving on, சந்த நடை சான்ற தமிழ்நாடன் வாசி தர தந்த நிதித்திரளின் தன்ம விசேஷத்தால். So here there are three different things are being referred. Um, Here also Muruganar makes a particular reference of a lot of objections about Monikkavachagar's actions. The first part says Sanda Nadai Sandra Tamil Nadan. Obviously, we could understand this in multiple meanings depending on how we split those words. Sandam is a particular rhythmic pattern that is very special for Tamil language. Sandam is a way in which one composes poetry so that the meter follows from one line to the next line to the next line, so that when it's sung, it comes out very beautifully. So there are very many rhythmic patterns, and there are very specific grammatical rules that control how such poetic meters can be used to compose poems. Sandanadai Sandra Tamil Nadan. Tamil Nadan is the king of Tamil region, or king of the region in which Tamil as a language is spoken. So here it refers to Harimardana Pandian. He is the king under whom Monikkavachagar serves as the prime minister. And the qualification that's given to that king is Sandanadai Sandra. Either we could take it as Harimardana Pandian himself was a poet who understood the rhythmic patterns of the old Tamil, or it could be taken as Harimardana Pandian as a king appreciated the old Tamil and Tamil literature which had Sandanadai, which is the rhythmic patterns that are previously referred. Either which case, Sandanadai Sandra Tamil Nadan refers to the king, and he gave a pile of cash. Tanda Nidhi Tiralin. Tiral is a pile or a collection. Nidhi means money or cash. So he gave a pile of money to Monikkavachagar with the purpose of acquiring a high class of horses for various purposes, such as going and engaging in warfare and so on and so forth. So he gives that money and asks Monikkavachagar to go and acquire a high quality of, a group of horses. But here, Monikkavachagar takes the cash and he goes and builds a temple, Gurumurtamaha Kulaviya Tan Kovil. So, in order to celebrate Lord Shiva as his own guru, because previously Monikkavachagar ends up meeting his guru under Kurundai tree. The story goes that Lord Shiva himself came as his guru and initiates him in the path of spirituality. In order to, since then, he has been in the path of liberation, or we could just say path of self-inquiry. And without any choice in that matter, Paramartham Endru Appaniyil Selavidave. Monikkavachagar did not have any choice because of his permanent abidance in the Lord's feet, or Kajal, the anklets of the Lord. Paramartham Endru, he thought is the without a choice, the highest act of dharma for him was to spend the money that was meant to be buying horses in building a temple to celebrate Lord Shiva as his guru for the benefit of others. Remember, the whole reason Monikkavachagar came is to show others how to live a pious life. naturally the question comes to our minds: shouldn't Manikavacher listen to his king, who asked explicitly to buy a group of high quality horses, whereas he takes the money without any information to the king? He goes and spends that money to build the temple. For that, Muruganar gives the qualification Tanma Visedhatal. Nobody can go and spend that money as they wish. First of all, it was not a choice of Manikavacha to go and spend that money, because he's been directed by Lord Shiva to do so. And he just went and listened to Lord Shiva to abide in that permanent inner awareness that was established in his heart. As a result, he went and spent the money. Second, any money could not be spent in building the temple. That money could be spent only if it was meant to be spent. And he uses the word Dharma Viseshatal. Dharma means dharmam. It is meant that money that was given to him is because of the act of dharma, and that was earned merit by the king himself. That's why the qualification of Sandanadai Sandra Tamil Nadan comes in, because the king, who had a huge affinity for the goddess Tamil, because Tamil was, many ancient poets and literary folks consider Tamil as the highest form of divine expression. Because of the meritorious actions that was done by the king, the money that was meant to buy the horses is so special in dharmic ways, so that that money could be spent in building the temple, although the king was not aware, and Manikavacha did not have a say, or he didn't do it out of his own devious mind actions, rather because of his surrendered heart, which led him to go and spend that money. So that is Muruganar's defense of Manikavachaga's actions. It's done so poetically and so subtly, so we have no moral confusions in the action that was done by Manikavachagar. And we would actually see Lord Shiva's divine play in the subsequent set of verses and that Muruganar is about to write here. Going back to this verse, Munda Ayal Pondru Murugalan Mukti Nerikku Anda Kajal Andri Ariya Paravasathil Sandanadai Sandra Tamilnadan Vasitara Tanda Nidithiralin Tanma Viseshathal குருமூர்த்தமாக குலவிய தன் கோவில் பரமார்த்தம் என்று அப்பணையில் செலவிடவே. So there are three things that Muruganar wants us to take in this segment. First, abide in the holy feet of the Lord, which is abide always in the inner awareness. In Bhagavan's other literature, we know that inquire in self, who am I, and abide in the Spurana that appears. So that's the first thing. Abiding in such high state leads one to act according to the divine will, which is second. Anda Kajalandri Ariya Paravasatil. Because of the bliss that comes from abiding in the feet of the Lord, all other material actions are not cared for by such a person. So it's very clear Manikavachagar is established in that particular state early on. So that is the first message. Abide in the self, abide in the non-action action of the Lord. Second, because of such abidance, all other things become irrelevant, because the mind is busy in its abidance and it's not engaged in external activities. So that's a second message. Third, at that stage, actions are directed by the Lord, and that is the state of surrendered action by a surrendered devotee. So, in that surrendered state, குருமூர்த்தமாக குலவியத்தன் கோவில் பரமார்த்தம் என்று அப்பணியில் செலவிடவே. Because the Lord directed Manikavachagar Such a temple has been constructed by him, and it's done as Paramartham Endru Appaniyal Selavidave, because it is the supreme path as divined by the Lord. That's why Paramartham, it's not some normal action, it is the action as directed by the Lord. Indru Appaniyal Selavidave, that money is spent in that action. That action is Kurumurtamaha Kulaviya Kovil, which is to build a temple for Lord Shiva, worshipping him as Guru for the benefit of rest of the humanity. So such a temple was built at Avudiyar, which is called Avudiyar Kovil today. You can see the statue of Mickkavachagar here, and this is one of the carve outs in the temple's, the main entrance, in which case you can see Mickkavachagar approaching Lord Shiva, who acts as his guru earlier on, sitting under the tree, which is called Kurunde tree, which is well celebrated in that temple. Um, to support this idea that Mickkavachagar was completely abiding in the glory of the feet of the Lord and nothing else mattered to him, there's a verse in Tiruvachakam, verse number 520, in which Mickkavachagar himself sings about it. Kannar முதலோய் கழலிணைகள் கண்டேன் கண்கள் களிகூர எண்ணாது இரவும் பகலும் நான் அவையே எண்ணும் அதுவல்லால் மண்மேல் யாக்கை விடுமாறும் வந்துன் கழற்கை புகுமாறும் அண்ணா என்ன கடவேனோ அடிமை சால அழகுடைத்தே. Let's start with the last phrase here. Adimai sala அழகு உடைத்தே. அழகு உடைத்தே is beautiful. It is a magnificent thing to do. What is that? Adimai sala அழகு உடைத்தே. To be devoted, to be subservient to the commandments of the Lord, which is, how does that happen? Which is to abide in His feet or abide in the inner awareness. And that's what he says in the first phrase, Kannar Nudaloi. Kannar Nudaloi is, this is talking to Lord Shiva, where, he's shown as to have three different eyes, the normal two eyes and the wisdom eye, which is the third eye in his forehead. So Kannar Nudalo is, it's saying he who has the third eye in his forehead. Kajal Inaigal Kanden. I cited his kajal, which is his anklets, the glorious anklets, which is nothing but his inner, my own inner awareness, which is called as the feet of the Lord. Kangal Kali Kura. Enna Thiravum Pahalum Nan Avaye Ennum. I couldn't think of anything else. Day and night, all I could be is, see his feet and abide in its glory and enjoy its bliss. So he says, Kannar Nudaloi Kajalinegal Kanden, Kangal Kaligura Ennadu Iravum Pahalum Nan Avaye Ennum. I couldn't think of anything else. All I could think of him is to abide in his glory, in his divine feet, and nothing else mattered to him. Aduvallal. But for that, Manmel Yake Vidumarum, leaving my body in this earth, meaning death. Vandun Karake Puhumarum, come and surrender in his feet. Anna enna kadaveno. Would I even think about it? Would I even have time to think about it? Because those are all distractions. To think that I'm going to die, to think I'm going to surrender, to think I'm going to be devoted. These are all thoughts manifested by our minds. And those are all external things. The only internal thing is to abide in the glory of the self. That's what the first four lines say. Therefore, Adimai Sala Aழகு உடைத்தே. I could just abide in the glory of the self, and whatever happens in that subservient state, in the surrendered state, that action or those actions are beautiful. அழகு உடைத்தே. It's beautiful. So, taking Mickkavachagar's own words, which is, I have surrendered unto my Lord's feet, and because of my surrender, Day and night, I couldn't think of anything else, including would I die? Will my body die? Will I surrender? How do I surrender? What do I do when I surrender? What actions do I do? There is no confusion. There are no chatters in our minds or in his minds. Anna, enna kadavino. Could I even think about it? Adimai sala alahudaithe. So going back to this verse, மூண்ட அழல் போன்ற முருகலான் முக்தி நெறிக்கு ஆண்ட கழல் அன்றி அறியா பரவசத்தில். That line refers to that particular verse by Mickkavachagar, where when the path of liberation is so beautiful, can somebody think about anything other than that? So we will read these six lines. மூண்ட அழல் போன்று முருகலான் முக்தி நெறிக்கு ஆண்ட கழல் அன்றி அறியா பரவசத்தில் சந்த நடை சான்ற தமிழ்நாடன் வாசிதர தந்த நிதித்திரளின் தன்ம விசேடத்தால் குருமூர்த்தமாக குலவிய தன் கோவில் பரமார்த்தம் என்று அப்பணியில் செலவிடவே. And this is the temple that exists today. It's called Audiyar Temple. Back when it was constructed, that this is called Thiruperumthurai. And this is one of the statues in Tirupparamthurai. And this particular shrine, which exists in the temple, is the one that actually shows how Mickkavachagar approaches the Lord, who's seated in Kurunda tree, and he gets his initial Upadesa. And this statue is the statue that goes around for procession of Mickkavachagar. His statue is also kept in Chidambaram temple alongside Lord Nataraja when the procession happens. And this is the temple that was built by Mickkavachagar using the money that was meant to buy horses for Hari Moorthy, the king. So moving on to the next four lines, which are lines number 27 to 30. So he goes and spends the money. He builds the temple. The temple's progressing really well. The king sends his servants to inquire the progress of the horse trade, and eager to know when and where, how would he expect those horses to arrive to his kingdom, because he had no idea about this temple being built. So it said, கிங்கரரால் வேந்து அழைக்க கேட்டு மதி மாழ்கலான் சங்கரனாம் தன்னடியில் சார்ந்து குறை சாற்ற விலைமதிக்கலாகா விரிசுடர் மாணிக்கம் சலமனத்தன் கண்டு மகிழ சார முதல் உய்த்து. Obviously, this is a continuous verse, a poem. So we are splitting into smaller verses so we can understand and discuss each sections. But this is not split as a different set of sections by Muruganar himself. So, கிங்கரரால் வேந்து அழைக்க கேட்டு மதி மாழ்கலான் சங்கரனாம் தன்னடியில் சார்ந்து குறை சாற்ற. கிங்கரரால் வேந்து அழைக்க. Vendu is the king. So the king sends his servants. Kingarars are servants, are those who execute orders as directed by the king. Kingararal Vendu Aika Ketu. He asks them what's happened to the horse trade and when do we expect those horses to arrive at Madurai, which is where the king is and his headquarters is. Having heard that, Madi Malhalan, Malhu is curled or worried or depressed. Madi Malhalan is his mind becomes worried. Whose mind? Mickkavachagar's. So when a few servants come and they inquire on the orders of the king to understand the progress being made on the horse trade, naturally Mickkavachagar gets into a worrisome mood. And what happens to a surrendered devotee who gets worried? That's what is given in the next line. Sengaranam Tannadil Sandu Kuraisatra. He doesn't cry, he doesn't lie, he does not go into a complete depressed state. The action called for only one thing, which is continue to abide in the Lord's feet. And whatever happens, it is to the Lord, and He directs the actions. So that's what next line says. Even in that case where the money is spent, he doesn't have the money. When the servants or the king's directors come and ask for the status update, with a worrisome mind, he does what a surrendered devotee is meant to do. Sankaranam Tannadil Sarnd Kurai Satra. Sarnd Kurai Satra is confess his worries to whom? Sankaranam. Sankaranam is Lord Shankara, which is the other name for Lord Shiva. Tannadil, at his feet. Again, this goes back to the same thing that Bhagavan tells us again and again. Search for who's got the worries and abide in the source. Sankaranam Tannadil Sarndu Kuraisatra. Even the biggest set of worries disappear through the process of self inquiry, which is to be surrendered at the feet of the Lord. So, Kingararal Vendu Aழைக்க Kettu Madi Malhalan Sankaranam Tannadil Sarndu Kuraisatra. So, Manikavachar goes and abides in the feet of the Lord and asks for his direction. And Lord Shiva gives him the direction. And what is the direction? Vilaimadikkalaha virisudar manikam salamanathan kandu mahila sara mudal uitu. Uitu is send or give. Salamanathan kandu. Salamanathan is one whose mind is wavering or one whose mind is pulled by the worldly desires. Here, that means the king who wants these high quality horses to be brought to him, he's constantly engaged in the worldly activities or worldly desires. And the best ways to please him is to first send what he would appreciate the most, which is Vilai Madikalaha Virisudar Manikam. Monicum is a particularly expensive set of gems. This is in this particular case, monicum is ruby. Vilaimadikkalaha, which is very expensive, like immeasurably expensive. Viri Sudar Monicum, which is like shining, and it's gloriously shining. So Vilaimadikkalaha Viri Sudar Monicum. So Lord Shiva directs Monikavachagar to go and give and gift these expensive shining rubies to Salamanathan, who is the king whose mind is constantly wavering and pulled by desires. Kandu Mahila, so that he can enjoy it. Sara Mudal Uitu, first action, which is to go and send those through those servants. So Kingararal Vendareka, the king sends those servants to ask for the progress. Madi Malhalan, Manikavachar is worried. The worry leads him nothing more than what he has been doing, which is Sankaranam Tannadigal Sandu Kurai Satra. Continue to abide in Lord Shankara's feet and confess all your problems and all your doubts to him. The answer comes Vilaimadikkalaha Virisudar Manikam, the immeasurably expensive, gloriously shining rubies are sent. Salamanathan Kandu Mahila, the wavering king, the king whose mind is constantly pulled by the external desires, can see them and become happy. Kandu Mahila Sara Mudal Uitu. Let's go and send that first. So that's been sent. So going back to those previous 6 lines, Munda Ayal Pondru Murugalan Mukti Nirikku Anda Kayalandri Ariya Paravasatil Sandanadai Sandra Tamilnadan Vasitara Tanda Nidithiralin Tanma Viseshatal Gurumurtamaha Kulaviya Than Kovil Paramartham Endru Appaniyil Selavidave Kingararal Vendu Aழைக்க கேட்டு மதி மாழ்கனான் சங்கரனாம் தன்னடியில் சார்ந்து குறை சாற்ற விலைமதிக்கலாகா விரிசுடர் மாணிக்கம் சலமனத்தன் மகிழ சார முதல் உய்த்து. So that, so this is the beautiful iconography at the Audiyar temple, which was a temple built by Mickkavachagar. You can see the king, going for a warfare in the horse, and so the king whose mind is constantly engaged, who's actually waging wars, who wants to expand his territory, who wants to win, he appreciates all material things, and therefore those rubies were sent. Now, the next part of the Leela unfolds, which are covered in lines 31 to 37. So, what happens next? The rubies were sent, and you can't hold on to the king indefinitely with those rubies. So, eventually, he gets tired. So he is impatient to see the horses for which he spent a huge sum of money, a pile of cash, sent through his prime minister, who is Maunikavachagar. Um, Now, Lord Shiva himself comes to action directly. And how does he do it? நரித்திரளை நாம பரியாக்கிக் கொண்டு அரிமர்தனம் அருந்தவர்த்தால் கண்முன் மரகத மாணிக்கம் மயங்கு எழிலோடு அம்சொல் துரகதமா ஊர்ந்து அரசன் சோத்த மகிழ்ந்து ஏற்றொருளிக் கொள்ளுக என தான் கயிறுமாறி கொடுத்தலும் அந்நள்ளிரவே முன்னை நரிகளாய அப்பரிதாம் ஊரை அவலமுறுத்து உளையிட்டுக் கொண்டோட. There are so many stories. The entire life of Maunikavachagar are buried in these 8 lines. So first, Narittiralai Nama Pariyaki Kundu Av Arimardhanam Sai Arundavartal Kanmun. So here Arimardhana, the king's name is explicitly discussed, Harimardhana Pandian. Sai Arundavartal, because of the relentless penance that he must have done in his prior births, what happens? Kanmun, in his own eyesight, the Lord himself comes to present himself. And how does he do it? Narittiralai Nama Pariyaki Kundu. He collects a huge set of jackals and converts them as horses. Narittiralai Nama Pariyaki. In name or in form, they become horses, but they were actual foxes or jackals. And by converting them, he rides in one of them and he appears in front of Harimardana Pandian. And that can happen only because of the prior penance that the king must have done. Otherwise, it's not easy to have the direct experience or the direct sight of the Lord in front of us. And when the Lord appeared, and this is where the poetic beauty of Muruganar's verses come into play. Maragada Manikam Mayangu Ejilodu. In the previous section, he discussed about giving those rubies to the Lord so that the Lord would enjoy the material aspects of those gems. In this line, he says, Maragada Manika Mayangu Ejilodu. Ejil is his actions or his countenance or his beauty or his radiance. Mayangu Ejilodu. Mayangu is dimmed. Which gets dimmed? The brilliance of Maragatam, and which is emerald, Monicum, which are rubies. So the brilliance that are shown by emeralds and rubies or any shining gems are nothing compared to the radiance of the Lord, who shines as the supreme effulgence. Amsul Turagadama Wundu Arasan Sotta Mahildu Etwaruli. Turagadam means horses. So he comes with those above said horses, which are nothing but jackals. And then in those horses, the king looks at them and he's so impressed by the quality of those horses. And he falls, in reverence, or he salutes the Lord, who comes as a horseman here. Arasan Sotta Mahildi, he's so happy, not because of having seen the Lord, but having seen those material objects, which are nothing but jackals, but they actually are posed or they converted into horses, majestic horses for that matter. Looking at them, he makes his salutations to the Lord, and Lord, Mahilndi Etru Aruli, he graciously accepts that salute, although the salute is not meant to be the spiritual in nature, or because Harimadana Pandian recognized the presence of the Lord, he did that salute only for material purposes. Even then, the Lord accepts that salute through his own grace. There is something spiritually important here, which we'll come and discuss later. Sotha Mahildu Etraruli Kolluga. Here, have it. Ena Tan Kairumari Koduthalum. He hands over those horses to the king. So have it here. So in those days, if you hand over those ropes of an animal, the act of handing over would mean the recipient would own those animals going forward. ஏற்றொருளி கொள்ளுக என தான் கயிறு மாறி, கயிறு is rope or ropes that are tying those horses. மாறி கொடுத்தலும், he hands them over. So the king is happy. He takes those horses and ties them in his yard, and he is super, impressed by Mickkavachagar because he got those high quality horses, much more than what he expected. But that very night, Annallirave, that midnight, Munnai Narigalai Apparidam, those jackals which were converted to be horses became jackals. Oorai Avala Muruttu Oolayittu Kondoda. They create chaos across the city, and they ran hither and thither, howling wildly, and perhaps eating those horses that were actual horses in the king's backyard. So the story unfolds from that point on. So there are so many different aspects in this particular set of words and these lines that Muruganar wants us to take and understand. First, Naritthirale Nama Pariyaki. The natural question is the Lord Shiva came, the Lord came and he handed over those horses to the king. Why couldn't he just buy the high quality horses and make the king happy? Why should he actually hand out a set of fake horses which are nothing but jackals? There are several meanings here. In effect, there's only one. Jackals are thought, could be a metaphor for our thoughts, which come continuously one after the other. And they are not pious, they are mostly distracting, mostly external in nature, and mostly making a lot of noise and howling wildly. So, those are our thoughts. Those very thoughts are converted into beautiful horses, which are material objects or material desires. When our desires, which are nothing but jackals, which pull our attention outside, become become attracted to a set of objects, they look like these majestic horses. So Arimardana Pandian represents us, our mind, our individual souls, because of our past penance. The Lord comes and gives whatever we desire, and they shine beautifully like emeralds, rubies, or any of our desires. And when we get those desires fulfilled, such as the one here, when the king gets his horses given to him, we salute the Lord, we pray to him, we praise his glory, not because of the supreme bliss he could give us or we seek them, but because we are prayerful and thankful to the Lord for the material things that he had given us. Even then, the Lord accepts our prayers. Etvaruli, Mahilndi Etvaruli, with with happiness, he accepts those prayers and he continues to give us those horses, which are the objects. But in effect, those objects are nothing but jackals, which are our base desires, which continue to come out and which continue to pull us out of the reality of the self. And eventually, all these happiness or all these external things that provide us happiness are nothing but those jackals that'll end up being distracting us. Therefore, they all become in the night or over a period of time, they all become like these illusory things that leave us. That's what is meant by the last two sentences. நள்ளிரவே முன்னை நரிகளாய அப்பரிதாம் ஊரை அவலமுறுத்து ஊளையிட்டு கொண்டோட. So those thoughts will just disturb us, disturb our body, disturb our mind, disturb our peace, disturb our abidance in the self. So what we seek all the time the material objects. We are granted those material objects through his divine play. They are nothing but our own mind's manifestations, which are foxes, which are the ones that pull us out of our reality. Even then, the Lord happily gives and gives and gives with the hope eventually we stop asking and we actually abide in the glory of the self, which is ever present. That ever present reality, which exists within each of us, is better than those emeralds and rubies or any other bright gems. Maragada Manikam Mayangu Ejilodu. It's better than anything we could see. That beauty, that wonderful display of the presence of the Lord. So that is the reason why Lord Himself could have granted anything Harimadana Pandian wanted, and He continues to grant us that. But those desires can never be fulfilled because when the desires are fulfilled, the next set of desires come, and the next set of desires come. So, whereas in the earlier section, Muruganar had declared Lord Shiva's sole purpose is to help each individual soul realize the self. That is the very purpose for which his grace exists. So, going back to these verse lines, நரித்திரளை நாம பரியாக்கிக் கொண்டு அரிமர்த்தனன் செய் அருந்தவர்த்தால் கண்முன் மரகத மாணிக்க மயங்கு எழிலோடு சொல் துரகதமா ஊர்ந்து அரசன் சோத்த மகிழ்ந்து ஏற்றொருளி கொள்ளுக என தான் கயிறு மாறி கொடுத்தலும் அந்நள்ளிரவே முன்னை நரிகளாய அப்பரிதாம் ஊரை அவலமுறுத்து ஊளையிட்டு கொண்டோட. We will see from lines number 21 through 26. மூண்ட அழல் போன்று முருகலான் முக்தி நெறிக்கு ஆண்ட கழல் அன்றி அறியா பரவசத்தில் சந்தனடை சான்ற தமிழ்நாடன் வாசிதர தந்த நிறித்திரளின் தன்ம விசேஷத்தால் குருமூர்த்தமாக குலவிய தன் கோவில் பரமார்த்தம் என்று அப்பணியில் செலவிடவே கிங்கரரால் வேந்து அழைக்க கேட்டு மதிமாழ்கலான் சங்கரனாம் தன்னடியில் சார்ந்து குறைசாற்ற விலைமதிக்கலாகா விரிசுடர் மாணிக்க சலமனத்தன் கண்டு மகிழ சார முதல் உயித்து நரித்திரளை நாம பரியாக்கிக் கொண்டு அரிமர்த்தனம் சைம் அருந்தவத்தால் கண்முன் மரகத மாணிக்கம் மயங்கெழிலோடு சொல் துரகதமா ஊர்ந்து அரசன் சோத்த மகிழ்ந்து ஏற்றருளிக் கொள்ளுக என தான் கயிறுமாறி கொடுத்தலும் அந்நள்ளிரவே முன்னை நரிகளாய அப்பரிதாம் ஊரை அவலமுறுத்து உளையிட்டு கொண்டோட. With that, let's stop for this week. If there are any questions, please let me know. There's a question posted here.
In the comments, Brindaji posted comments.
Yeah. Can the time period of Arimardana Pandian be taken as the time period of Mickkavachagar in regards to the question which time period he belongs to? Absolutely, yes. Unfortunately, the ancient kings had many repeating names. There's in fact a tradition that in order to sustain the glory of a particular king's name, the grandson or grandson of a king is usually named by the same name. So in the history, there are many Harivardhana Pandyans who existed. So historians and scholars struggled with using that as a referral point to name and to understand the timing of Lord Mickkavachagar's period. In fact, there are very many theses and PhDs had been completed in analyzing Mickkavachagar's time period. It still remains an enigma how his name was not included in the 63 saints. However, whether it was included or not, his impact and the subsequent, Saiva tradition owes to quite a lot of Tiruvachakam verses in shaping what we understand Saiva Siddhanta today. In recognition of the supreme status of this, both Tiruvachakam and Tirukkovayar, the two books that were written by Mickkavachagar, belongs to the eighth canon of the 12 canons of Saiva, which are 12 Tirumurais.
Thank you, Hari. And I just mentioned before that I found out that in Avdiyar Koil in Atmanatha Swami temple, there is no special Nandi, there's no Nandi inside the temple, but there is a Sannidhi for Mickkavachagars. That explains what you say. Mickkavachagar is an incarnation of Nandi. That makes it clear because there's no Nandi. Like all Shiva temples have Nandi, but this temple does not seem to have a Nandi.
Yes, that's very well said. As well as Avdiya temple is so special, there is not also a Shiva Linga. In the main sanctum sanctorum, you have an empty space. It's so different. The temple is so beautiful and so different compared to many other Shaiva temples that have existed. Also, scholars have wondered why none of the other saints, such as Appar, Sundarar, and Samandar, who go to all the other temples, have not sung the glories of Avdiya temple, which is interesting. Equally speaking, Tiruvachakam also talks about another temple in Uttarakosamangai. Also, the temple is so special, it's so beautiful. However, Uttarakosamangai is near Ramanathapuram, which is about 10-15 kilometers from Ramanathapuram city. Equally, none of those three Devaram songs exist in Uttarakosamangai also. There is also quite a bit of an interpretation that very many of the Devaram songs were lost. So it's quite possible they went and they sang the glories of Lord Shiva in both these temples, but we may have simply not gotten it because of not getting most of the verses that they composed. We don't know the historical reason, but there are only analyses that have been done based on the intrinsic as well as extrinsic evidences that we have today.
Thank you. But I was just wondering if there is a big temple being constructed, even though they are miles away from Madurai, won't the word spread to the king that there is a big temple is getting built somewhere, even though, he's waiting for the horses? Word of mouth would have gone, right? It's just a curiosity question. It has got nothing to do with what we are discussing. But I'm just wondering, if such a huge temple is being built, the king would have gotten some words about that.
Yeah, so that's a naturally good and logical question. In even Muruganar's words, you could actually see that Harimardana Pandian is so externally focused and so, and then he calls him Salamanathan, and the one who is externally engaged in all the other activities. I don't think he cared much for the temple, or even if he had gotten the news that temple's being constructed by some devotee, he would have paid much attention because his focus was, more gems and more emeralds and rubies, horses, fights, and expanding kingdoms. So his focus was not in the spiritual matters. Well, that is the answer that at least Muruganar seems to give. But that is also the question. That's also the answer that is given in the Tiruvachakam Puranam, which is one of the early, it's either 13th or 16th century opus, in which Mickkavachagar's life story comes in which Harimardana Pandian has been depicted as the king who's constantly engaged in the external activities. So that's the answer that Muruganar at least gives us.
Thank you. When you are saying that the Atmanatha Swami temple does not have a Moolavar, there's no real sculpture for the god over there, it reminds me of a similar temple, not exactly the similar in many qualities, but in Madurai we have a temple called Immayilum Nanmai Thiruvar Koil, means the Lord bestows you the boon even in this life, not just you don't have to wait for the next life. In this life, in that temple, the Moolavar is Shiva in a human form, like the god, and he is worshipping the linga. So that is the Imaile Narmathurva. So there is a human form and then the linga form, which is the Aru Guru. But Atmanatha Swami temple is even goes one step beyond that, where there is no form at all to show exactly the formless nature of Atma. So that is even better. I can't say better, but even unique in a way than Immailum Nanmai Thiruvara Koil. But it reminds me of the temple in Madurai. But thanks for sharing that.
That's beautiful. Are there any other questions before we wrap up? If not, we will just see the one last time, these lines. மூண்ட அழல் போன்று முருகலான் முக்தி நெறிக்கு ஆண்ட கழல் அன்றி அறியா பரவசத்தில் சந்தனடை சான்ற தமிழ்நாடன் வாசித்தர தந்த நிதித்திரளின் தன்மை விசேடத்தால் குருமூர்த்தமாக குலவிய தன் கோவில் பரமார்த்தம் என்று அப்பணியில் செலவிடவே கிங்கரரால் வேந்து அழைக்கக் கேட்டு மதிமாழ்கலான் சங்கரனாம் தன்னடியில் சார்ந்து குறைசாற்ற விலைமதிக்கலாகா விரிசுடர் மாணிக்கம் சலமனத்தன் கண்டு மகிழ சார முதல் உய்த்து நரித்திரளை நாமப் பரியாக்கிக் கொண்டு அரிமர்த்தனம் அருந்தவர்த்தால் கண்முன் மரகத மாணிக்க மயங்கெழிலோடு அம்சொல் துரகதமா ஊந்து அரசன் சூத்த மகிழ்ந்து ஏற்றருளி கொள்ளுக என தான் கயிறுமாறி கொடுத்தலும் அந்நள்ளிரவே முன்னை நரிகளாய அப்பரிதாம் ஊரை அவலமுறுத்து ஊழையிட்டுக் கொண்டோட. With that, we will wrap up today. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. We will see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hari. Thank you.